The banks are melting, and signs of a major credit contraction are already starting to emerge, Michael Snyder reports. When there is fear in the air, banks start getting really tight with their money, and right now there's lots of fear in the air. The major credit contraction would be a nightmare scenario for the economy, and as you'll see below, there's evidence that this is already starting to happen. Hopefully our leaders can find a way to calm things down, because we all remember what happened during the last financial crisis. Banks decided to substantially tighten their lending standards, and that really deepened the economic downturn. So leaders should be doing what they can to support the stability of the system, but in so many cases they end up doing just the opposite. For example, on Wednesday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen publicly admitted that blanket coverage of all uninsured deposits in the United States is not even under consideration. In response to a direct question about whether the Treasury would circumvent Congress to insure all deposits, Yellen replied, "I have not considered or discussed anything having to do with blanket insurance or guarantees of all deposits." When she made this statement, she poured even more liquid on the fire, lighter fuel on the small and middle-sized banks all over the country. Wealthy individuals and large companies have already been pulling billions of dollars out of such banks, and a lot more money will be inevitably pulled out in the days ahead. And now that these banks are bleeding deposits at an unprecedented rate, what do you think their approach to lending will be? Needless to say, they're going to be extremely averse to taking risks at this point, and that means that lending standards are going to be getting a lot tighter. In response to a tweet in which Joe Biden touted the accomplishments of his administration, Elon Musk warns that the banks are melting. President Biden tweeted, "In my first year in office, we protected more lands and waters than any president since John F. Kennedy. We've also made the largest investment to fight climate change ever. Today, we're building on that momentum by protecting additional natural wonders," he said. Elon Musk tweeted, "The banks are melting." Musk is quite correct. Our banks are definitely in the process of melting, and hundreds of them could soon be in very serious jeopardy. And just to make sure that hordes of banks will soon be teetering on the brink of disaster, the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates once again this week. As CNN Richard Quest pointed out, our banks are stuffed to the gills with these government bonds, and every time rates go up, those bonds become even less valuable. Quest said, "Now, if inflation was your goal and your number one target, then you'd have gone 50 basis points. But obviously, the overriding concern today is the banking sector. And remember, Zane, the problem with the banking sector is that all banks are stuffed to the gills with these government bonds. Raise the interest rate and the bonds become less valuable. So even today's actions at a 0.25% makes things a little bit worse for the banks," he said. And later he added, "More banks are going to go out of business. More state and regional banks in the United States will need to be resolved. To use the technical phrase, they'll be taken over, they'll be wound up, they'll be taken into ownership, all sorts of things." So is there evidence that all of this banking turmoil is starting to directly affect the behavior of U.S. consumers? Well, it happens that credit card transactions are already starting to tumble quite dramatically. As Citi's Paul Lejeune writes in the latest Citi Credit Card Insights report available to professional subs, the bank's credit card data for the 16 subsectors it tracks show that total spending in March week 3, ending the 18th of March, decreased by 10.3%, a big deceleration versus March week 2, which was down 6.8%, and driven by high single-digit decline in transactions. Ex-food spending decreased even more, tumbling by 13% versus 8.1% in March week 2. As Lejeune notes, this was the first week of data following the disruption within the financial sector, and we were curious if it might have had an impact on the consumer, and it sure did. And as Citi goes on to note, the third week of March and the first week after America's regional banks imploded was the biggest decline in total retail spending we have seen since the pandemic began April 2020. As economic activity slows down, companies all over the nation will be forced to slash payrolls. We've already been witnessing a tsunami of layoffs in recent months, and it appears that this tsunami is gathering even more momentum. For example, Walmart has just announced that it will be giving the axe to hundreds of e-commerce fulfillment workers. Hundreds of workers at 5 U.S. Walmart facilities that fulfill e-commerce orders are being asked to find jobs within 90 days at other company locations, a spokesperson confirmed to Reuters. About 200 workers in Pedricktown, New Jersey, and hundreds of others at Fort Worth, Texas, Chino, California, Davenport, Florida, and Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, were let go due to a reduction or elimination in evening and weekend shifts, the spokesperson said. And Accenture just announced that it will be laying off a whopping 19,000 workers worldwide in the months ahead. Professional services company Accenture plans to cut 19,000 jobs worldwide over the next 18 months in order to trim costs amid the tumultuous economic environment. Most of the cuts will impact those working in the company's non-billable corporate roles, Accenture said in a Thursday filing with the SEC. Even Disney is being forced to slim down. In fact, we're being told that the coming wave of Disney layoffs in April will be a bloodbath. With Disney April 3rd shareholder meeting, a virtual affair this year, less than 2 weeks away, some clarity is emerging about the company's plan to reduce staff and cut costs. Insiders tell Deadline that multiple rounds of cuts are being prepared. The first one is being targeted for late March, likely next week, we hear. March 30 or 31st have been floated as possible dates, but that has not been confirmed. According to sources, there will be a big wave in late April, described as the big one or the bloodbath, when a large portion of the cuts are expected to come. Needless to say, this is not normal. We have not seen anything like this since 2008, and every month this crisis just seems to escalate even more. You know that things are bad when one of the largest employment websites in the entire world starts conducting mass layoffs. Job search platform Indeed announced on Wednesday that it plans to lay off 2,200 employees, roughly 15% of its staff. Indeed CEO Chris Hyams said in a letter shared with employees that the cuts come from nearly every team at Indeed and Indeed Flex, noting that the decisions were carefully made with human resources, the legal department, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as teams. The economic activity slows down. As it slows down, it's inevitable that many more Americans will suddenly lose their jobs. Just hope that it does not happen to you. We have been anticipating that a major economic meltdown was coming, and now it is here. Unfortunately, most Americans still assume that our leaders know exactly what they're doing, but the truth is that way too often they're taking actions that are making our problems even worse. This is by Michael Snyder. About the author, he says, "My name is Michael, and my brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future America, The Beginning of the End, Living a Life That Really Matters. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing, and one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I have also started a brand new Substack newspaper, and I encourage you to subscribe so that you won't miss any of the latest updates. I've published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and Most Important News, and the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I ask also that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before they make any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. And this is by Michael Snyder on the Economic Collapse blog. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box